Good morning, you are watching A News. I'm Katie Wilson. Here are the top stories. Donald Trump warns Russia of introducing secondary tariffs on its oil exports while promising to bomb Iran. Germany's outgoing Chancellor Olaf Scholz says that the European Union is prepared to respond as a unified bloc to US tariffs. Rescue operations continue in Myanmar and Thailand, with teams working urgently to locate survivors following the devastating earthquake. US President Donald Trump is ramping up the pressure on Russia and Iran by threatening steep economic penalties and, in Iran's case, even military action if diplomatic efforts stall. The warnings signal a sharp escalation in the administration's foreign policy approach.
US President Donald Trump says he's prepared to impose secondary tariffs on Russian oil exports if, he says, Moscow continues to obstruct negotiations for a ceasefire in Ukraine. That's according to an interview with NBC News. He's referring to penalties that he could place on other nations and businesses that engage in trade with Moscow. The move would target global buyers of Russian oil, potentially pressuring allies and rivals alike. The tax hikes potentially could be as high as 50%. But Trump says he believes that Russian President Vladimir Putin will come round.
I think he'll be okay. But if he isn't, I was disappointed in a certain way. Some of the things that were said over the last day or two having to do with Zelensky, because when he considers Zelensky not credible, supposed to be making a deal with him, whether you like him or you don't like him. So I wasn't happy with that. But I think he's going to be good. And I certainly wouldn't want to put secondary tariffs on Russia, but if they were put on, it would not be.
The president has also threatened similar action against Iran, warning that if Tehran refuses to negotiate a new nuclear agreement, the consequences could be military in nature. He was quoted saying that failure to strike a deal could result in bombing, the likes of which they have never seen before.
We're going to make a decision on secondary tariffs on Iran based on whether or not they're going to make a deal. If they're going to make a deal, then we're never going to put secondary tariffs on. We're going to hope they have a great, long, and successful life as a country. But we'll see what happens. It's very interesting. I can't imagine them doing anything else but making a deal.
It follows Iran's rejection of direct nuclear talks with America after Trump sent a letter to Iran's supreme leader earlier in the month, urging renewed diplomatic engagement. However, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian says Tehran is open to indirect negotiations.
Direct negotiations with the US have been rejected, but Iran has always been involved in indirect negotiations. And now, too, the Supreme Leader has emphasized that indirect negotiations can still continue.
Since the collapse of the 2015 nuclear deal, it's believed that Iran has ramped up uranium enrichment well beyond previously agreed limits. Western powers argue this signals a move toward weapons capability, but Tehran insists its nuclear activities are strictly for civilian energy use. Experts warn that secondary tariffs could strain relations with third-party nations and complicate global energy markets, already under pressure from multiple conflicts.
US President Donald Trump says that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky could be reconsidering the key minerals agreement. Speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One, Trump warned that backing out of the deal could have serious consequences.
Do you think they are right now?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think he wants to make a deal. And I think Zelensky, by the way, I see he's trying to back out of the rare earth deal. And if he does that, he's got some problems, big problems. We made a deal on rare earth, and now he's saying, well, you know, I want to renegotiate the deal. He wants to be a member of NATO. Well, he was never going to be a member of NATO. He understands that. So if he's looking to renegotiate the deal, he's got big problems.
A New York Times investigation revealed that US involvement in Ukraine's war effort has been far deeper than publicly acknowledged. Beyond supplying weapons, the US has secretly provided intelligence, guided military strategy, and even assisted in strikes inside Russian territory. The findings raise questions about the extent of America's role in the war and how it may change under President Trump.
New findings reveal that the US played a far bigger role in Ukraine's war effort than previously known. A New York Times investigation found that while the US has openly disclosed $66.5 billion in military aid to Ukraine, American intelligence, strategy, and technology have secretly shaped Kyiv's battlefield decisions. At the center of this secret partnership was Task Force Dragon, a US operation based in Wiesbaden, Germany. Each day, American and Ukrainian military officers worked together to identify Russian targets. Using satellite imagery, intercepted communications, and electronic intelligence, they pinpointed Russian military positions and supplied Ukraine with the precise coordinates needed to strike. This cooperation became crucial in the first year of war when the Biden administration sent HIMARS, a powerful long-range artillery system. These US-supplied systems allowed Ukraine to inflict heavy losses on Russian forces, helping Kyiv launch a successful initial counteroffensive. By the end of 2022, Ukraine had gained the upper hand, according to the media report. As the war continued, the US kept shifting its boundaries on its involvement. Initially, Washington insisted there would be no American personnel on the ground. However, over time, military advisors have been secretly deployed to Ukraine. First, they were called subject matter experts, but their role gradually expanded, with some moving closer to the battlefield. Eventually, the partnership expanded across the Russian border itself. To defend Kharkiv, the US authorized ops boxes, zones in Russian territory where American officers provided precise strike coordinates. The CIA was also given rare permission to assist Ukrainian drone attacks deep inside Russia. By early 2024, American involvement had expanded even further. A major US-Ukrainian campaign called Operation Lunar Hail launched strikes on 100 Russian targets across Crimea, forcing Russian forces to retreat key assets to the mainland. Despite all these efforts, Ukraine's 2023 counteroffensive collapsed due to internal divisions. A power struggle between top Ukrainian military leaders led to a split battlefield strategy. Instead of focusing resources on a decisive push toward Melitopol, forces were divided between multiple fronts, including a costly fight for Bakhmut. In the end, Ukraine failed to reclaim key territories, and Russia regained advantage. As the war continues, these revelations provide highly specific insight into US-Ukraine military cooperation under the previous administration. At the same time, with President Trump pushing for a new direction in US-Russia relations, it is unclear how cooperation between Kyiv and Washington will evolve in the future.
Germany's outgoing Chancellor Olaf Scholz says Europe is committing to cooperating with the United States, but the European Union is prepared to respond as a unified bloc to US tariff hikes. He made the comment before the opening of the Hanover Industrial Trade Fair, saying that trade wars harm all parties involved. He stressed that Europe is not weak and reiterated that the EU's goal remains to cooperate with the US. However, if the US forces Europe's hand, particularly with tariffs on steel and aluminium, the EU will respond collectively.
It is therefore also clear that we as the European Union will respond to the United States customs policy. Clearly and resolutely, as the larger economic area with more inhabitants, with great economic power, and all the opportunities for action that arise from this, but at the same time firmly prepared at every moment and in every hour to stand up for compromise and cooperation. That is why this remains the strategy we are pursuing together. Cooperation, clarity and strength are required here at the same time.
Authorities in Myanmar are racing against time to save survivors trapped under the rubble after a massive 7.7 magnitude earthquake struck on Friday. It's one of the country's deadliest quakes in decades, and the need for humanitarian assistance continues to grow.
Myanmar's government is urgently coordinating rescue efforts following the powerful 7.7 magnitude earthquake. Officials are racing against time during the critical 72-hour rescue window as the death toll surpasses 1,700 and more than 3,400 people remain injured. The disaster has also left approximately 300 missing.
Because of the strong nature of the earthquake, some of the basement floor are collapsed down and some people are trapped in this area. We're trying to manage as much as we can, and also these fire service departments are working 24 hours in this day to catch up the golden hours and blue hours.
International assistance has started arriving, with China being the first country to send a rescue team, followed by other nations. The earthquake, which struck near Mandalay, is one of the most powerful in Myanmar's history. Its tremors were felt in neighbouring Thailand, where a skyscraper collapse in Bangkok killed 18 people. Myanmar, located in a seismically active region, has experienced devastating quakes before, including a 6.8 magnitude quake in 2016 that damaged ancient temples in Bagan. However, the scale of destruction from this latest disaster has been described as the worst in over a century.
The United Nations announced that a severe lack of medical supplies is hindering relief efforts following the deadly earthquake in Myanmar. The UN, along with humanitarian partner organisations, are mobilising emergency response efforts. The UN's humanitarian agency emphasised that urgent humanitarian assistance is required as the full scale of the disaster unfolds. However, the response has been hampered by a shortage of medical supplies and damage to roads and communications infrastructure. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to escalate military pressure on Hamas, insisting that this approach is key to securing the release of Israeli hostages. His remarks come amid ongoing protests over his handling of the crisis.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel will intensify military pressure against Hamas to secure the release of Israeli hostages. Netanyahu's statement comes amid widespread protests criticising his handling of the hostage situation in Gaza.
The military pressure is working. It works because it operates simultaneously. On one hand, it crushes the military and governmental capabilities of Hamas, and on the other hand, it creates the conditions for the release of our hostages. This is exactly what we are doing. Last night, the cabinet convened and decided to intensify the pressure, which was already high, in order to further crush Hamas and create the best possible conditions for the release of our hostages.
He also expressed appreciation for recent US strikes against the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen, who had threatened to escalate attacks against Israel following earlier US military actions.
Regarding the Houthis, I greatly appreciate the action taken by the United States, our ally. They are dealing with them with great force. We, of course, are acting to defend ourselves as we did recently. But the fact that the United States is engaging there with significant force is a big change.
The Prime Minister's remarks come as Israel's army report of successfully intercepting a missile they claim was launched from Yemen. Sirens had sounded across central Israel, prompting residents to seek shelter.
The US Middle East envoy's recent visit to Baku has set a floor for speculation. Steve Witkoff arrived in the Azerbaijani capital with little fanfare and no official statement from Washington. The silence has only fueled intrigue. Some analysts suggest the visit may signal progress in peace talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Others see a deeper strategic play involving the US, Israel, and Azerbaijan itself. So what lies behind this high-level visit, and what does it reveal about Azerbaijan's role on the global stage?
A high-level visit to Baku has triggered waves of speculation across Azerbaijan and beyond. Steve Witkoff, the US envoy for the Middle East, recently arrived in the Azerbaijani capital, yet the visit was met with conspicuous silence from Washington. In her article for Israel Nation News, Rachel Avraham, CEO of Dona Gracia Center for Diplomacy and an Israel-based journalist, points out that while Azerbaijan's media has confirmed the visit, the absence of any US statement has led to widespread conjecture about the true nature of Witkoff's mission. According to the author, initially, many believed the timing pointed to progress in peace talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan. That assumption gained traction after US National Security Advisor Mike Waltz publicly called for a final peace agreement, the release of prisoners, and broader cooperation for regional security and prosperity. Rachel Avraham underlines that Witkoff's background in Middle East diplomacy prompted a shift in interpretation. Some now believe the visit was less about Armenian-Azerbaijani normalization and more about cementing a deeper alliance between the United States, Israel, and Azerbaijan. This theory gained momentum following recent developments. Calls to repeal Section 907, which restricts US aid to Azerbaijan, and growing discussions about officially bringing Baku into the Abraham Accords. As a Muslim-majority, Shia country, Azerbaijan has positioned itself uniquely in the region. Its strong ties to Israel and the United States, alongside its independence from Iranian influence, have made it a strategic ally in an increasingly polarized region. Despite sharing a border with Russia and a Soviet legacy, Azerbaijan has preserved its political autonomy. Its vocal stance following a recent plane crash incident, openly blaming Russia, signaled that Baku does not bend under pressure, not even from Moscow. Azerbaijan's long-standing relationship with Israel and its energy cooperation with the European Union only reinforce its image as a pro-Western player. Its recent opening of an embassy in Israel is a symbol of that strategic alignment. Against this backdrop, Azerbaijan is emerging as a rare diplomatic bridge able to navigate relations with Russia and Iran while fostering close ties with the West. Its geopolitical balancing act makes it a potential mediator in the world's most intractable conflicts from Ukraine to the Persian Gulf. But such positioning comes with risks. Azerbaijan's growing cooperation with Israel, particularly in sensitive security matters, could trigger backlash from Tehran. In a region defined by sharp sectarian divides and unresolved conflicts, one misstep or even a misinterpreted gesture could upend Azerbaijan's hard-won credibility as a neutral actor. Still, Azerbaijan has proven adept at playing on multiple boards simultaneously. Hosting EU-led peace talks with Armenia while engaging with Russian-led economic blocs reflects its pragmatic approach to diplomacy. Witkoff's visit may well be part of a broader American effort to empower Azerbaijan as a stabilizing force, one that serves Western interests without becoming overly exposed. In many ways, this strategy mirrors the business-like diplomacy seen during the Trump-era transactional, interest-based, and results-driven. For Washington, peace doesn't require perfect alignment, only predictable cooperation and mutual benefit. But navigating alliances in the South Caucasus is no easy task. Deep-seated grievances, overlapping interests, and historical wounds complicate every negotiation. Azerbaijan's challenge will be to continue maneuvering between opposing forces without losing its footing or credibility. Whether Witkoff's visit marks a turning point or just another chapter in the region's complex political calculus remains to be seen. What is clear, however, is that Azerbaijan is no longer just a participant. It is increasingly becoming a platform for regional and global diplomacy.
President of Uzbekistan Shavkat Mirziyoyev and President of Turkey Recep Tayyip Erdogan spoke by phone discussing ways to strengthen their strategic partnership. They noted growing trade, investment, joint projects, and more direct flights between their countries. The leaders also focused on preparations for the high-level Strategic Cooperation Council meeting and the organisation of Turkic States Summit. The President of Turkmenistan, Serdar Berdimuhamedov, confirmed his participation in the first Central Asian European Union Summit, scheduled for April the 3rd and 4th in the city of Samarkand in Uzbekistan. Leaders from Central Asia and the European Union will centre on expanding collaboration in trade, economic investment and cultural humanitarian sectors. Other topics to be discussed include initiatives in alternative energy, the green economy, transportation and digitalisation. Additionally, the summit will feature a series of high-level bilateral meetings. We're done for now, but don't go far. Stay tuned for more and have a wonderful morning.